Welcome back, everyone, to this week of the Frosty Canucks. I'm your host, Jason, who is fortunately joined by Frosty, even without internet. Oh, wait, no, now he has.
Yo, fuck Rogers. Am I right, fellas?
Yeah. Didn't you, post that they had, bought Shaw the other week or something like that?
They bought Shaw this week. Just for context, I am with a smaller provider in Ontario, but they use Rogers lines. So whenever there's an issue with Rogers, which there was, my ISP is like, well, we submitted a ticket on your behalf to Rogers because we can't do anything. And I'm like, oh my god, guys, what the fuck do I even pay you for?
Yeah, we have Rogers and Bell up here, and that's it.
Yeah, and out west, they had TELUS and Shaw, and now they have TELUS and Rogers. Mostly TELUS. TELUS owns the west part of Canada pretty well from what I have read and heard from people. But yeah, so Shaw was kind of like the fourth big player, big in air quotes, because Bell, Rogers, and TELUS are really the three big telecom companies in the country. And Shaw was the next closest thing they had to one, and Rogers just fucking bought them. And they're like, oh yeah, this means that there'll be increased competition. And I'm like, bitch, what the fuck? You just bought the competition. How are you coming out here saying there's going to be more competition?
Yeah, when I almost have enough hands for the competition to put up my middle fingers, yeah, that doesn't fly.
Yeah, I was saying a funny joke. So I was with Rogers for my cell phone before, and then they raised my bill without telling me, and I left immediately when that happened. Zero tolerance for that. So then I switched over to Freedom, which is owned by Shaw. So Rogers got my business back by buying up the company that I went to.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Yeah. They're like, oh, we're trying to win your business back. That was pretty funny. Cause I'm super cheap with my cell phone. I have a $200 cell phone that I bought outright, and I have a plan that costs less than $30 a month because I'm a cheap piece of shit.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Mine was a $0 phone, and I got mine for Costco, and I think I got $150 in gift cards for a $35 to $40 plan.
Yeah. So when Rogers calls me back, I was previously on a student plan with a flip phone. So until 2 years ago, I was using a flip phone for everything. Me using smartphones is a relatively new thing. When Rogers called me and they're like, we want to win your business back, I'm like, all right, what do you have for me? So I was a customer with them for around 7 or 8 years with the same flip phone the entire time on the cheapest plan that they had. And they were like, yeah, we want to give you a $100 a month plan that has all of these things and also the newest iPhone. And I was like, do you not understand what kind of a customer I am? You have almost a decade of data about what type of customer I am, and you just came in with a plan that is way too expensive for what I am willing to pay, and you're
You were probably costing them too much.
Yeah, well,
they want the money back with interest.
Yeah, basically. It just boggles my mind when you have all this data about what type of particular customers and businesses, all the big businesses have this information, right? And they're just not using it to effectively leverage that data so they can actually offer services and products to customers that would actually be compelling to them. Because working in IT, a big push over the last decade has been, oh, we need to leverage our data so we can figure out what type of customer people are, and fuck's sake, it's no progress has happened in the last 10 years, let me tell you. I've even seen it from my end. Shit like that is kind of proof that it's yeah, we've made fucking no progress in 10 years. Anyway, video games.
So, SquEnix had a bit of a presentation today, on the day of us recording.
Yes.
It was a 45-minute presentation, and it started with this Outriders game that I think it's kind of a Destiny-like game.
I haven't seen anything about it because I just got internet back not too long ago. I was reading a bunch of things to try and catch up for the podcast, but Maz did note in my Degenerate server, he said it wasn't like Destiny.
Okay.
I trust his opinion on that. He does play a lot of
Destiny.
Plays a lot of Destiny, but he's got a very good handle on when games actually are the live service in Mumbo Jumbo.
That's good, because it kind of looked like that from what I was looking at. I don't know much about the game.
I saw online with someone saying it looked like the most generic game they'd ever seen, and I was like, oh, that's not great. I haven't seen anything about it, but the fact that people think it might be a live service game, and the fact that some people were calling it generic, I'm assuming that it's a third-person military shooter, heavily features the color gray, and there is some kind of looting mechanic.
Yeah, it had looting, it had skill trees, I think it had a bit more color than you're saying, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess we kind of moved on from brown and gray. That was more like 2000 to 2010, but...
The PS3 era.
So, is it a third-person shooter, though?
It's third person, and I believe it's co-op, so...
I could understand why people would think that would be the most generic-looking fucking game.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was like a live service, because I was like, okay, it's all co-op based, great.
Who is developing this? People Can Fly. We love shooters. We love pushing boundaries. Outriders, here we go. Here's the elevator pitch for Outriders from their website. Outriders is a story-driven third-person RPG shooter that will put the player in the shoes of an outrider, the last hope of the human race trapped on Enoch, a dangerous and untamed planet. It's our most ambitious project to date, developed with Square Enix. Yeah, that does sound painfully generic. Is this a trailer? Ooh, it is a trailer. Here we go. No, shut up. No talking. No talking. Talking is bad. Wow, the first feature they show off in the trailer after all the talking is that you can use cover in a cover shooter.
Yeah, can we move on from this?
Okay, fine. Oh, they made Bulletstorm. That's the other game they made. Okay.
Ah.
Some other stuff I'm not super familiar with.
So that took up about 20% of the presentation.
Wow. Okay, they put a lot of eggs in that basket.
They followed it up with Tomb Raider, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary. They have an anime series with Netflix and Legendary Television, and they have another movie in the oven.
They didn't need to announce that there was another movie. I watched the previous one. It was okay. I'll give the anime series a try if it's on Netflix.
Mm-hmm. They have crossovers happening, one with Fortnite, and then the other with... I thought Ghost Recon Breakpoint was already dead at this point, so why?
The Ubisoft live service thing?
Yeah, that's the Ubisoft live service that broke the camel's back.
All right.
Probably the funniest announcement was there was going to be a Tomb Raider cookbook.
What the fuck?
Yeah, there's a Tomb Raider cookbook so that you can cook all the iconic recipes from the series.
What iconic recipes?
I don't know. That's the problem. I didn't think there's enough for a cookbook. Lara Croft hunts this deer and then
yeah, it's gonna say like
venison.
Fucking
that's about it.
Fire cooked venison? Like what the fuck?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm at.
I need a bigger gun.
So this is all for their 25th anniversary. I think the best news was that the full collection of all three of the most recent games, so that's from Tomb Raider Definitive Edition to Tomb Raider, the Shadow one.
Oh my god, Jason. Tomb Raider 2013, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Those are the names of the games you were looking for.
Yes. They come with all the DLC as well.
Oh, so it's like the definitive edition of all of the games.
Yeah, it's the definitive one of all three.
Having owned all of that already, gameplay-wise and DLC-wise, I think that Shadow of the Tomb Raider is the best.
But it's about 20 American, 26 Canadian, which isn't too bad.
Yeah, that's a really good deal.
For anyone who's not picked up any of them.
If you haven't played them all already and you were interested in it, then yeah, definitely.
Even if you got one of them.
If you don't have Shadow yet, then that's probably like a really good price to pick up Shadow with its DLC.
Probably the same price.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's the exact same price as what I paid. Or I think maybe I paid a little bit more like a year ago for Shadow at that price. And like all the DLC with it. Rise and 2013, I think you can usually pick them up on like Steam sales for like $5. So this is just like a cheaper way of buying everything all together.
It's gonna go up in price after April 2nd or something like that.
So they're just doing like a limited time sale.
Yeah.
At a certain price just to celebrate the anniversary then.
More or less, yeah.
That's like fine. It's not like Nintendo where they just fucking delist something after a certain amount of time like a bunch of dickheads.
There's 13 days from recording or something like that until 3D All-Stars is gone.
Fuck Nintendo and fuck that game.
Anyway, moving
on.
They announced 2 mobile games. Just Cause Mobile, which they just showed cinematics for, and then Hitman Sniper Assassins, which, again, they only showed cinematics for, and not even that much.
This is not the first time?
Oh, yeah. It's also a working title.
No, that's a lie. This is not the first time they've ventured into the mobile game space with their big
not.
IP kind of stuff. Although, Hitman 1 is a little bit confusing, because I guess they don't really own the IP for that anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that they've probably worked something out with IO or whatever, but...
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, right? They gave up IO and, like, the Hitman intellectual property back in 2015, Fuck, when did they get rid of it? 2016 or 2017?
2016 or 2015. It was like a year or two after Hitman 1 came out.
Yeah, that was in 2016, I think, was when it came out in 2015. I think it finished in 2016. Anyway, this is not the first time they've done that. They might, if they're successful enough and they have controls or gameplay that might be somewhat applicable to consoles, they might port them over to consoles as well later. They did that with
Hitman Go and like the
yeah, and
Lara
Lara
Croft
Croft
Go.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I forgot the names of those.
No, I remember those. I played them because I was like, oh, these are cute little puzzle games.
They were all right. I played the Tomb Raider one, and I thought it was pretty all right.
I played both. The Hitman one was kind of funny because you just slide up against another person and then
They just
go,
fucking fall over and
bye.
die.
They would just go to like a pile, like if you're playing checkers. Then they announced some smaller games like Bubble Bobble and other stuff. They didn't spend nearly as much time on Avengers as I thought they would.
That's probably because
fine.
they know it's not doing great.
Yeah. I think they did the new Hawkeye, or they showed off a bit more story that they're adding in as like another little tiny campaign, and then the big one was like, oh look, it's going to the current generation. Woohoo!
Okay.
All these improvements, faster loading times, better graphics, slower progression. Oh wait, no. Why'd you add that one in? God damn it.
Yeah, that game has a bunch of problems that have nothing to do with its technical abilities. Such as that no one wants to play it for any amount of time because it just doesn't have any compelling content.
It's a free upgrade though.
Yeah, which should be.
Better be. Exactly.
None of these consoles should have paid upgrades. If this shit exists on PC and does things like it already does on PC, then the console shit shouldn't be that much harder to do. It might even already be there. So it should be a free upgrade for y'all on consoles.
Yep. Balan Wonderland, they kind of did a 2-minute trailer on that.
Oh god, that's right. They're publishing that. Oh boy.
Anything more to say on that?
No, I just I don't know if I said it on the podcast, but I did play the demo and it was probably one of the worst things I played in that stream where I was playing demos, so.
And then the big announcement that they revealed was a lot of stuff about Life is Strange and the new one that they're doing, which is Life is Strange True Colors.
Okay.
Basically about this girl who's going to be going back to to her hometown, and
is it True Colors because she's like gay or something?
No, well, sorry, I had to think that there for a second, because technically they are like, oh, well, here are your two romantic options. Here's a boy, here's a girl.
Oh, okay. I just figured with like that name, it's like True Colors. I'm like, oh, is it like a play on the fact that she's coming out or to her like to her friends and family, or but maybe
no,
I guess not.
It's more to do with the fact that her special psychic power going to be that she can read people's emotions.
That's such a useless. Okay.
Yeah, and it has a really bad side effect of if it's so powerful, your rage could inspire her to also rage.
What the okay. Oh, that's alright, whatever.
Basically, she can be able to, she's going to be trying to figure out what actually happened to, I believe it was her brother or something like that, or a good friend, and because he's dead. Everyone's just kind of keeping quiet about what really happened, so it kind of seems like you're going to be doing like a bit of a mystery. Kind of similar to the first Life is Strange, which I preferred that one because at least it had time travel stuff.
So you've played it?
I have played Life is Strange.
I have not. I can't get over how like bullshit millennial pandering the game is in its writing.
It's really bad in the first episode and gets a bit better after that. They tone down a bit of that nonsense.
Yeah, I still don't know if I could get over that.
Oh, probably not.
So I'm a real piece of shit, so.
It's really funny because it's like you can make the decision that like would be the kind of the telltale moment of like, oh, you have this choice and this choice. You can't take it back. But in this one, for the most part, you're able to rewind and say, no, fuck that. No, that was a bad decision, which I kind of thought was kind of cool. This one won't have the time traveling, so it seems like your choices will stick.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like with any game that has time traveling, that it's really hard to make your decisions have any amount of permanence, which would somewhat mitigate your ability to meaningfully interact with the game.
It will kind of trick you because you'll think sometimes you'll be able to redo it and then can't. The odd time it will throw that wrench in. And then they announced that Life is Strange Remastered. It's not even that old of a game.
I was gonna say, wasn't it released on the previous generation of hardware?
Yeah.
So it's just a texture pack.
They're just making it look a little bit better.
Okay.
Got the Life is Strange and then the Life is Strange Before the Storm, which is the A cool one.
That's nice that they have like
Mhm.
a little bit of something in there.
I think the best announcement for the Life is Strange True Colors was that they're like, yeah, it's all going to be playable. It's still going to be episodic based, but you can binge it like Netflix.
That's smart. I don't buy games that are episodic when they release. Not that a lot of companies have kind of moved away from doing that anyway.
Yeah.
Like I consume Netflix by finding a show that I like, and then whenever it has like a new season, I'll watch the entire new season. Not immediately, but usually like I'll watch a couple of episodes and then stop, and then pick it up again and watch a couple more episodes. So I like having it all there because in theory I could get through it all in like a weekend, which is my like preferred way of watching things instead of it being staggered like out as one a week. I don't like doing that. Or with video games, God forbid, it ends up being once a month or once every several months, which is so much worse.
Yeah, Telltale would be the worst for that. It would be every 3 months.
Yeah, I could not.
With a delay every so often.
Yeah, I would have lost my mind if I didn't wait for when I did play a handful of Telltale games. If I didn't wait until they were actually like done before buying them.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to try and do with the Wolf Among Us 2. They announced that at the Game Awards like 2 games awards ago or 3. Nothing's been shown because they wanted to have everything done. Okay.
I mean, that's not a bad way of doing things, but
No, it's not. And the last thing that the Square Enix presentation ended off with is the Project Athea, which was also another tentative title or working title. It's being renamed to Forspoken.
okay. What is Forspoken?
It's by the Luminous, or it's running off the Luminous engine, so it's the same engine that Final Fantasy 15 was running on.
Okay.
And it's another action RPG.
Person is talking. It's pretty.
It's exclusive to the PS5 for the console and then PC.
Yay! I'm glad that the console manufacturers don't view my. Yeah, this trailer just. Oh wait, never mind. Hold on. The last like 10 seconds of the trailer has something that looks like gameplay.
Yeah, no, it was mostly gameplay, like that tiny chunk.
It looks like you play as a lady who jumps around and does magic powers.
Yeah.
All right.
Action RPG.
Yeah, I guess you did say that.
That's about all I could say about it.
We
don't know much about it. There's a dragon.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty, and that is everything we know. That's all you need to tell people, and they'll fucking pre-order it. So
Yeah, it's coming out in 2022.
that's a long way away.
Still showing shit off way too quick, too early.
Well, I mean, if it comes out in January 2022, then it's not a long times away. But even still, I doubt that it'll come out at the front of the year. It'll probably come out at the back of the year, get delayed into the next year. And I've been alive long enough to know how video games work.
Especially with Square Enix.
Yeah.
And with that, they ended the showcase saying, hey, we're going to do another one in summer. So
Basically, every company is copying. Nintendo was ahead of the time with Nintendo Directs. When they got tired of dealing with traditional media outlets, they're like, fuck it, we're just going to go directly to people. And now everyone else is copying that.
pretty much. You'll get your Ubisoft Direct. Surprised Microsoft hasn't done this shit yet.
I don't know if Microsoft knows how to do anything or if they just have nothing to show off. So they can announce everything they need to tell people in a tweet.
Yeah.
And that's all they ever do. Or maybe
Yeah.
they have some Microsoft specific thing I have quite literally never heard of before.
Anyway, that's it for that. Do we want to get into Matt's question?
Sure. It's a doozy, so I will try to paraphrase it. So my buddy Maz, as always, asking the best questions. Maz included some contextual information that goes along with this, so most people probably know he's a very big Destiny player. So recently Bungie has, I'm not going to say they destroyed, they made it so that 70% of the guns in the game, you can't continue to progress them forward. They're basically invalidating a bunch of the current items that are available from being part of the next whatever the fuck that goes forward, right? It's kind of like when card games take cards out of rotation and don't allow them to be used in whatever the ranked format is for a little bit. It forces the meta to get jostled up and for people to come up with new strategies using a different set of cards instead of just relying on the same really, really good cards all the time. In general, a bunch of people aren't really happy about this because if there's like a weapon that they have a particular fondness for, they're not going to be able to use it because it won't be able to like continue leveling up to the next season of leveling up. In Destiny, you individually level up your gear. And because there's no it's a game where you shoot guns, right? So the feeling of a particular gun might be one that you really like, and it might work really well with your class. So if you really like it and it works really well with your class, then obviously you want to use it. But if, they're going to rotate out 70% of the total guns and make it so they're like
Mm-hmm.
not can't keep leveling them up, so they won't be a valid option next season, right? You won't be able to level them up to like the next, I don't know what Destiny calls them, but like the next level of power levels, right?
Yeah, light levels or something.
Yeah, I think it is light levels, but so fundamentally, Mass's question is like, why do some game developers not understand their player base and how they will act after implementing stuff like this? Specifically with Bungie, they've had 7 years of having the Destiny fan base, and they were surprised at like how this had like a huge negative reaction. But then there's other companies like EA who seem to understand their player base perfectly, and whenever they implement new things, their player base is always happy. I know people bitch and complain a lot about EA and loot boxes and whatever, and like the EA sports games, but the people who complain about EA the loudest are people who never play EA's games.
That's true.
Where the people who actually play their games and really enjoy their games, they complain because they love the game, but they also, it's a different kind of complaining, right? It's like how I complain about Monster Hunter.
You love the game, Sue.
Yeah, exactly. The question is like, why do some game devs still not understand how their player base will react, even after interacting with them with a specific game and developing updates for it for over 7 years, while other companies seem to understand their player bases perfectly? He also asked a second question of when I will play Destiny or Football Manager, because he's been trying to get me to play Destiny or Football Manager for years now.
Do you want to get that question out of the way?
The answer is never, you friggin' Spurg. I will never play those games.
All right, on to question one.
But yeah, so it's not exactly a easy question to address. It's more of like a discussion topic. But did you want to start with your kind of thoughts for this?
So I'm not much of a Destiny player. It's not really my cup of tea. So I had a coworker. He was very excited about the new Destiny reveal. He was thinking it was going to be the third game, much like I did, because we were basing it off of their current trend, which was Destiny 1, expansion, expansion, Destiny 2, expansion, expansion,
Mm-hmm.
and we thought it was going to be a third one. I was laughing. He was very disappointed about it. But yeah, what struck me as odd was the fact that they were like very excited about like, we're going to be locking this stuff in the Disney vault, or sorry, the Bungie vaults, because there's just too much content. And I'm like, everyone paid for that content.
Yep.
That's really shitty of you to just get rid of it just because you think there's too much. I mean, that's the fun part about it. There's the variety and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was very baffling of a decision, and I'm glad to know that there's a ton of people that think the exact same way. Because I mean, if you buy it, you should be able to keep engaging with that content.
This is not specifically related to that. This is after they've removed parts of the game. This is them removing the weapons from the game. So like originally they were removing planets and like missions
Yeah.
from the game. They're not removing them in this. You'll still have access to them. It's just that they're like 70% of the guns will be completely unviable because they're not in the active rotation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the same thing happened with Anthem. There was the time where the drop rate was increased so drastically that people were having a lot of fun engaging with that content because they were getting a lot of rare stuff. And then, like, people at BioWare, EA were like, oops, that was a mistake. Crank that down. And then they're like, but it was fun
Yeah.
to get all that loot and stuff. Like, why would you do that? Like, that doesn't make sense. At that point, it's just like, okay, screw it. It wasn't even like you had to buy the guns. It wasn't that kind of a microtransaction system. It was just for the skins for the your robot armor kind of stuff. So why would you turn that off? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it turns out that people who make games about looting are confused that people who play those games like to loot.
Yeah.
Imagine that. I think more broadly, you could even expand this question to include things like the lack of success that other game companies and development teams have found with their own like live service games, and Destiny still stands as the king among all of them by virtue of being the least pants on head about things. I feel like a lot of these types of games, specifically the development team, doesn't seem to have any understanding of how to make the games as enjoyable as they could or should be, because they just don't seem to understand what their audience wants. They put things in, I assume, that they think are really engaging or that will engage a more casually oriented crowd, and that's fine for a bit, but The casual crowd will only come in and spend like a little bit of money and then fuck off, where the really dedicated players are going to stick with the game for an extremely long amount of time. So in theory, you should probably cater more of your content towards them than constantly
Mm-hmm.
trying to attract new people. If you're constantly trying to attract new people, right, then you could keep doing that over and over and over and over again. And then eventually, if you've neglected your hardcore fans for a
Your
really, really
whales.
long time, I'm not even talking about whales. I'm talking about like hardcore fans, right? Because you don't have to be a whale to be a hardcore fan of a game. You can still play it for a long time. And in the case of Destiny, that's still super valuable. Even if you're not spending money on the game, it's still super valuable to Bungie to keep you playing the game because you are content. For PvP, you need people. For raids, you need people. For a lot of the PvE events, you need people. So people are content. Having somebody continue to play the game is just as valuable. Well, I'm not going to say just as valuable as them spending money. Obviously, they want you to spend money and play the game, but
I think I remembered the best example for this would be the culling,
yeah,
because that was a game. It was like the big first battle royale game, and then they kept making changes so much that they started alienating their audience to the point where they all just basically said, "Fuck off, I'm leaving."
yeah, and that's not what you want to do, right? Like you want to,
No,
and you see this with games that release annually as well, but you want to introduce changes that don't rock the boat too much. So you want to cater the game to the audience that already exists. So you can't rock the boat too much, otherwise you might risk changing things that the core audience doesn't like and doesn't jive with. But you still have to make some changes so that you can bring in new players. And there's a balancing act about finding like what are those things we need to tweak? What are those things that we can change that will keep the core experience the same, but that will change things enough so that people who were not willing to give this game a try will come in and give it a try. And like the worst thing that you can do is if you change things too much and then a bunch of new people come in and they say, "Ooh, I really like this new thing you guys have done," but then your core fans really don't like that. So then you like lose all your core fans, and these new people might not actually stick it out with the game. So then it's like, oh, you potentially risk losing everyone.
yeah, that happens with like YouTubers and like when they do
Yes.
like a series that they're known for, and then they try and branch off and to reach a new audience, and then the old fans are like, I don't like this shit, but then they bring in the new fans. Is it like at that point is it almost worth it to keep going with the new content, like if it outweighs the current fan base?
Yeah, I think for games it's a little bit more of a you should probably lean more heavily on your hardcore audience. There are franchises that have existed for fucking 30 years off of the back of the same audience the entire time. And I think that's really valuable. Understating that the value of somebody who is bought into a game that or a franchise of games that much is would be ridiculous. With Destiny specifically, it's kind of baffling that you have a bunch of people who said like this is not a very good change to Bungie and they still implemented it anyway and then sat there baffled about how their player base was reacting overwhelmingly negative towards this change. And it's like, well, it's like, guys, we told you that this was going to happen, right?
Yeah, no
So,
kidding.
and it's like I don't even know. I guess that's not true. I did just say where the logic there is that they want to try and attract new people, right? But you should not want to rock the boat to the point where it pisses your current audience off. It's just I can't exactly understand how doing this would help with new people though, because Maz says that like they got rid of 70% of the weapons and introduced what would be 17% of the total weapons into the game. So like
I don't know if it's just because it's too big for consoles, possibly. Like there's too much shit.
maybe I don't
I don't
know.
know. It might be a technical
Yeah, I was
reason.
gonna say maybe, or maybe more broadly, it's like a scope problem, which is a issue that Game
Hmm.
Freak has with Pokemon. I actually watched a really good video this week about the animation in Pokemon from a channel called New Frame Plus. It's Dan. Previously, he used to do extra credits, and New Frame Plus is what he does now. He did an episode on the animation in Pokemon, and he talked about like I forget exactly what the numbers were, but it's like, hey, if they do like 10 unique animations for every single Pokemon in Sword and Shield, that's like 7,000 animations. And if it's 11, then it's like, now it's like 9,000 animations. And it's like, holy shit. So it's like, yeah, you see how like as soon as you add like one more animation with this volume of characters, it's like the workload becomes absolutely ridiculous. Even for a franchise that makes this much money, if you ask like any animator how much work that much animation stuff would be, it'd be like there's no way you could release a game. It would take like 10 years to do all the animations. And a lot of games
Hmm.
that have really frequent entries, they recycle animations from game to game to game to game to game. They just make sure that each game, every time they put in new stuff, they make sure the animations are really, really good. Monster Hunter does that. They've been using the same animations for 20 years. I saw what the first Monster Hunter looks like, and almost all of the animations that are in that game are still in world.
Just fine-tuned.
Like, yeah, they maybe tweaked like a few things. They just made the animations look really, really good, and then they could keep bringing them forward with each game they were using, so they could invest the money into them because they knew they were going to keep using them over and over and over again, which is like mind-boggling. Getting back to the point I was making there, maybe it's like a scope creep problem where Bungie's like looking at the amount of guns they have in the game, and it's hypothetically, let's say there's 100 different guns you can use. I don't know what the actual number is, but let's say there's 100 different guns in the game, and they're like, wow, balancing all of these for PvP is a pain in the ass. Let's just get rid of a bunch of them, and then we don't have to worry about it. Like, that might be the logic behind it.
Yeah, but it pisses off the player who's invested all that time into that gun or something.
Yeah,
like that.
and that's
like, but that's my 100-hour. That took me 100 hours to get, or something like that, or something ridiculous. And you're like, fuck you, Bungie.
Yeah, I've never seen a game, especially because in Bungie it's more action oriented. So I've seen MMOs where they'll like, or even Monster Hunter is a good example. Whenever they release new monsters in Monster Hunter World, with the updates, they release new weapons that could be made from that monster's shit. But a lot of the time, the new monster that came out would have the new best weapon. So you go, okay, fuck my old weapon. You go kill the new monster, and you make the new weapon, and now that's the new best weapon. I've seen that happen a lot in MMOs when I used to play MapleStory. New content would come out, new best weapon is introduced into the game, you get the new weapon, upgrade that weapon, you fucking throw your old weapon in the garbage. Doesn't matter how much money you spent on it, how long you spent upgrading it. New weapon is better, you use that weapon. You make the old content obsolete so that no one wants to use it, and then it doesn't matter if it's there or if you get rid of it because no one's using it. But in this case, because Destiny's more action focused, each of those weapons has a particular feel to them, right? Let's say, as like a really basic example, let's say you have like Sniper Rifle 1 and Sniper Rifle 2, and they handle slightly differently. Then you introduce a new version for Sniper Rifle 2, but you don't introduce a new version for Sniper 1. So people who are using Sniper 2 can move to the new Sniper 2 variant, but like people who are using Sniper 1, maybe they don't want to move over to Sniper 2, but you've gotten rid of the ability for them to keep using Sniper 1 because you've made it no longer a valid option because you've increased the power level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh man, you just like pissed everyone off who used that weapon, who really liked using that weapon. And that's fundamentally what's happened here. Like I said, they got rid of 70% of the guns in the game. So there's a bunch of people who are used to using certain weapons who really like the specific individual minutia of that weapon, and now they can't use it because Bungie has said this is no longer a valid option.
Yep.
I feel like I've said a lot of things, but I don't feel like I've said much of anything at the same time.
Short answer is yes, we agree. Some devs definitely don't understand their player base.
Yeah,
and it shows.
Well, I mean, it wasn't as much of a question. It was, like I said, it was more of a discussion point. I think we've
True.
Maz, you can tell me if I have adequately talked about the topic and / or if you have other points that you want to make, because you always do. You're not shy about telling me when you think I'm wrong. So yeah, I don't have anything else I want to kind of say on this topic. Okay, yeah, you're done too.
I'm good too.
Alrighty. Hopefully that was good. I like that as a discussion point. I thought that was
it was
pretty good.
It's good. Thank you once again for the question.
Yes, thank you as always. What's next on the docket?
The last thing before we get to our games we've been playing is Germany and loot boxes.
Did I include this article?
Yes.
Oh.
I have notes on it too.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, I did include that. So yeah, just ahead of Germany kind of officially banning loot boxes or the sale of loot boxes to minors.
Yeah.
They haven't passed the legislation yet, but it's basically a surefire thing at this point.
Yeah, it has to go through the federal court first.
Most people are viewing this as a
done. It's done.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with a word for when something's a foregone conclusion, but I spaced out on it. But anyway, people believe that it is inevitable that this will happen. This going through will mean that games with loot boxes in them will no longer be able to... I believe it meant that the games with loot boxes will no longer be allowed to be sold to minors.
Yeah, so it's going to have the rating go up to whatever the highest is in Germany.
Yeah, and I should have...
For adults.
Yeah, I should have looked up the rating system, because Germany uses a different rating system from the rest of Europe.
Be like whatever 18 plus is.
Yeah, it'll be whatever the
equivalent.
18 plus or adult rating is. But yeah, so they will not stop selling the games, and I believe that if a parent doesn't view loot boxes as being negative or whatever, they could still buy the game for their child, but the games will be banned from being sold to minors. There's not much more to be said about that. They're just not liking this kind of stuff. They think it's harmful for children. They're going to also update their online guidelines because they have like online guidelines for helping parents to understand how the internet works and what their children might be affected by on the internet. The EU is very different from North America. They give a lot of shit about their population. It's very strange to see when it's like, oh yeah, our government over here just fucking like steals our money and doesn't do anything with it.
You're not wrong.
There's a more nuanced take there, but I'm not going to get into it here.
Thank you.
But yeah, not again. I don't want you to have to cut out another 30 minutes of me ranting about politics on the podcast.
Unions!
Yeah, don't ever fucking mention unions again. And I guess the big thing here is that with Germany doing it, what's the play for the rest of the European Union countries, or like the rest of Europe?
Dominoes are falling.
Yeah, because Germany's one of the head kind of honchos in the European Union. European people out there, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. If they put in this legislation, they're viewed as being kind of like a big leader in Europe for these types of things. If they say this is gambling and we don't want these games to be sold to minors, when's the next fucking shoe gonna fall, right? Like or a cat fall? I don't know. When's the next shoe gonna drop? That's what it is. What country is gonna be the next one that's like immediately just like, yeah, this is banned for minors now? And then if like
France.
Probably not. I was actually expecting it to be like the Netherlands or Belgium or one of the other countries that's actually looking into this already. We've talked about loot boxes before, and I don't really know what the long-term ramifications of that will be because...
I mean, FIFA's going to take a big hit because
that's
exactly the one that's the EU.
Like, it can still be sold to, like legal adults, right? But I don't know how much of the population, or even how much of the spending population, is 18 or younger, or whatever Germany views an adult. I don't actually know what age Germany considers someone an adult, but that's besides the point. I don't know how much of the buying population, how much of the money from these games is coming from an audience that is younger. And this was specifically started because of EA and like FIFA, right? But here's a knock-on effect for that. Here's a game I do know has a younger population. What the fuck is Epic gonna do with Fortnite?
Very good question.
Because that'll be an adult-only game now.
Hearing you say that's so fucking funny.
Yep. It's a game that I know mostly is played by children, and it's gonna be an adult-only game in Germany now. And Overwatch, a T-rated game or an E10 plus game in most territories, is gonna be a adult-only game now.
They could probably fake their account age just like you can for YouTube, but imagine if there's like a moderator in Germany.
Yeah, I don't...
18-year-old Jimmy, you don't sound very old.
Well, that's one of those things where if your parents allow you to do stuff, it says, oh yeah, you can play this game, that's fine. Then it's like, who could say that you shouldn't be playing that? But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what, like how much fucking revenue stops moving hands, or stops changing hands rather, as a knock-on or result of this, right? So yeah, just saying that the Fortnite will be an adult-only game. I agree. That is the most fucking ridiculous thing I think I have said on the podcast so far. But that's what happens. That game is entirely monetized through its loot box system.
They're gonna have to like adapt. They're gonna have to come up with the new loot box.
Yeah.
Pyramid scheme.
So I think Battle Pass is already a really good system, and I know that Fortnite already uses a Battle Pass.
Right.
It's kind of like a season pass, basically. Except instead of, because everyone associates the wrong thing with season passes. Thank you, game industry. Well, it's like a season pass should be a pass for the season, but no one really views it like that because a lot of games that have no seasons use the season pass model incorrectly, where, like fighting games are still doing season passes the way that season passes work. It's like, okay, here's the new season, here's the new content.
Yeah, but for Ubisoft, for like the Assassin's Creed,
yeah, it's like, what the fuck?
Season pass for all the DLC. It should just be a DLC pass.
Yeah, it's like, why don't you just call it the fucking expansion pack then? Well, we can't call it an expansion pack because compared to fucking expansion packs from the 90s, there's no content in these.
Yeah, you're not wrong on that. I mean, that's why The Witcher made sense.
Yeah, Witcher's one of the only games that called its downloadable content an expansion pack, because it's one of the only games that's been released in the last however many years that actually included enough content to justify calling it an expansion.
It's a rare anomaly.
I think they tried to use expansion passes or like expansion pack before, and people were like, this has nowhere near as much content as like a PC expansion pack. So you got to remember, like in the 90s, an expansion pack for like StarCraft meant you got an entire extra 3 campaigns and a bunch of new maps and a bunch of rebalanced units and a bunch of new units, and it's like, oh man, there's like so much content in this.
Meanwhile,
Yeah, and like in The Sims and like The Sims 2,
Yeah, exactly.
Like
You got a
university pack or expansion pack.
Yeah, you got a fuckload of stuff in those. Or like Zoo Tycoon, you got a whole bunch of new animals, got a whole bunch of new decorations, a whole bunch of new systems were put into the game.
90s were good.
The 90s was good because fucking companies hadn't figured out how to fuck consumers over yet.
Gotta go back, Marty.
Yeah, we really do. What were we talking? Oh yeah, we're talking about loot boxes. So yeah, I'll be curious to see if other countries in Europe drop the ban hammer following Germany's actions. I believe that will happen. I just don't know when. It's kind of like whenever the United States does something, the Canadian government are like, what are you guys going to do? Because sometimes they will follow suit on stuff that the United States does, and sometimes they will double down in the opposite direction. But it's just like, it's not uncommon for countries that are neighboring countries that share a lot of, policy, economic, and values to like copy one another on political policies when those happen, or like when big political policies happen, right? So it'll be interesting to see if other countries that were already kind of debating this sort of stuff, if Germany kind of taking the plunge will be what they needed to do it themselves.
But are Pokemon eggs loot boxes?
That article is hilarious.
Yeah. So Kotaku had an article defending Pokemon eggs.
Written by my best friend, John Walker.
Are you buddy with him?
Absolutely.
The sarcasm is
palpable.
Very high. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I kind of agree with John on the article, because the article is like Niantic is including the odds for the Pokemon eggs.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, but he's like, this sort of change isn't necessarily needed for this game beyond some other changes that would probably be better for the game, because the eggs are like a nice surprise rather than a thing you need to engage with specifically to fucking play the game the way it's intended. I'm still confused, because I only know eggs from regular Pokemon, so can you elaborate on what eggs are in Pokemon Go? Because it seems like they're completely different from how they're implemented in the normal console games.
Yeah, so in Pokemon Go, you get eggs, and you used to have only 9 spots, and now you have 12, where there's 3 that are these bonuses for beating Team Rocket and getting these really special eggs. They're like red eggs, where they've got something super rare in them.
Okay. Oh, so it is just a loot box.
From my explanation, and maybe come to that conclusion. So each one has a different distance that you have to travel, and it's 2 kilometers, 5, 7, 10, and then the new one that they introduced, I think late last year, was 12. And that's how far you have to walk in order to open the egg. You cannot delete these eggs, so once the 9 are filled, you have to get rid of them. So if you have a bunch of 2K eggs, that's going to be like the really shitty shit. Like, you might get like a Mudkip or something like that.
Mudkip is awesome.
I knew
you take that back, you whore.
First one that came. I knew it was the first one that came to my mind.
Mudkip is special.
But anyway,
take that back, you fucking whore.
No, it is. But in Pokemon Go, like you get tons of those, because in order to like evolve it twice, you have to have 125 candies, and if you catch one, you get 3, and if you unlock it in an egg, it's a little bit more.
You're talking about a bunch of things I have no concept of. I've never played Pokemon Go.
The Pokemon don't evolve by leveling them up. They evolve by you feeding them candy, and then they just grow.
Oh. How do you get the candy?
You have to catch more of the Pokemon, or you have to unlock them through eggs, or you get rare candies that you can just use to give them candy points. It's very weird.
So in order to level up my Mudkip, I have to take a bunch of Mudkips to the glue factory and turn them into candy Mudkips?
Yes, you'll catch them, and then you can transfer them to the professor of that game.
This game is satanic.
He will just do whatever he says.
This game is satanic. I hate this game already. This is evil shit. I don't want to commit Mudkip genocide. They're too special and precious for that.
I mean, the shiny cutie does it all the time. You have to kill like 500 of them to increase the odds.
Oh my god.
That's not a lie. That's what they do in Shield. It's
Pokemon players, you are all monsters. I have never done any of this. This is news to me. I just fucking compete. Like, I'll do the competitive, or at least I used to do the competitive side of things, but I've never done any of this shit. You are all monsters.
so yeah, you can't delete the eggs, so you have to unlock them.
That's kind of stupid.
It really is. Here's the part where people compare it to the loot boxes, kind of, because you can buy what Ubisoft said is time savers, and these are the egg incubators that you can buy to do multiples, and then some of them are like, this is gonna decrease it by like, I think like half the time, so that's gonna save you, like, for the 12-kilometer egg, 6. So that's kind of where they compare it to the loot boxes, because the really rare shit is in those ones. So, I can unlock these things faster, even though there's not really like a big emphasis on PvP, but there is some PvP in the game now.
Well, are there Pokemon you can only get from these eggs?
Yes.
Oh, that's a bit pish.
Yeah, when they introduced the 12k eggs, they were like, oh, this is what's in them now, and you're like, I can't get them anywhere else in the game at this moment.
I would feel bad if, like one of my favorites was in there, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I like that very much.
But that's kind of where the comparisons to loot boxes kind of are, because you can engage monetarily with the eggs.
Yeah, I could see how that could be a bit problematic. In general, I think the tone of the article is more like there's bigger fish to fry than the loot box problem in this game. I think that's more what John was aiming to address. It feels like them doing this would be like a facade instead of like actually putting some money towards and fixing some of the more meaningful problems in the game, which I'm not familiar with because he doesn't elaborate on any of them, but I'm sure players of the game, if they're listening to this podcast, they're already listing off a bunch of things that they would probably rather have instead of odds on those eggs.
Probably, yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to...
No.
Okay.
Not really. I just thought the article was kind of funny.
At least the title's pretty funny, and the first couple paragraphs in it did give me a chuckle, so...
Yeah. When I was reading the first one, I was thinking back to, like, EA's surprise mechanics.
Surprise mechanics. Or, what was that one that got memed on a bunch with Star Wars? Feeling of pride
and accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a legendary line.
Yeah, that one. Fucking Jesus Christ. EA will go down in meme history for that.
Yeah, I think someone compared to that to like the Avengers when they were like saying like, oh, we've lowered the experience leveling rate, and they're like, oh, another pride and accomplishment scenario.
Yeah.
I want players to feel like they earned the levels.
I want them to feel like Iron Man. To feel like they spent several weeks in the desert making a suit out of recycled armor.
Imagine if that was the VR game.
Oh yeah, that's right. They're making a VR Iron Man.
No,
I think that'll mostly be a...
That already came out.
Oh yeah, it was in the fucking Game Awards. That game's probably mostly just flying around, but yeah.
Yeah, I know it is. But
Jesus Christ.
But imagine it just starts with it.
You are in the desert.
Pointed a gun with a terrorist.
Yeah.
You're like, you're going to build this.
Yeah. Build me a Jericho missile.
You have to like stealthily get all the equipment for the Iron Man suit.
Yeah, sorry. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the fucking Iron Man film from over a decade ago.
Yeah, exactly. It's in a decade.
You can kiss my ass.
Sorry. It's in the first like half an hour of the movie, and what we said is barely even spoilers. It's just funny.
Well, so it's like the...
So we're gonna get into it.
Yeah, we're gonna get into Iron Man right now. Fuck you. So it's every good Marvel film is set up with the exact same structure. They show off the character. They show you what the character's fatal flaw is. In Tony Stark's case, it's like he's extremely arrogant and super confident that what he's doing is fighting for the good guys. And then he gets captured by the terrorists and finds out that they've been using his shit to terrorize people and kill American soldiers. And he's like, oh my God! I haven't been fighting for the good guys. I've been warmongering. I'm a piece of shit. So the second part of every good Marvel film is that the hero's world view or like their character flaw is somehow used against them to create some kind of a problem. And then the kind of meat and potatoes of the film is them trying to overcome that character flaw, and the climax happens where they overcome that character flaw in some kind of meaningful capacity, which is represented by them beating whatever the big bad boss or bad guy in the film is. And then there's the calm down afterwards. But that's the typical arc of how a fucking good Marvel film goes. You introduce the character, it shows the character flaw, some kind of problem happens in the movie because of their character flaw, They spend most of the movie trying to overcome their character flaw and this problem. The climactic thing happens when they overcome at least a part of it by beating this person, and that's how it's represented, and then the film ends.
And repeat 20 to 30 times.
Yeah, you repeat that 20 to 30 times, and you throw in
a few $1 billion.
Yeah, and then you just fucking poop out billions of dollars, trillions of dollars even. Yeah, so that's
merchandise.
Yeah, that too. They have screwed that up a few times, which is amazing to me because it's such a simple formula and it's so compelling because you're like, here is a relatable character trait that is a relatable flaw that a lot of people have, or maybe have like a little bit, and this character is like really exaggerated in this particular character. Like I said, Iron Man is like super confident in his like worldview, and he's super confident, super arrogant, and that's like what leads to his downfall, and he, over the course of a couple of movies, overcomes that and whatever. They have managed to bungle that up a few times. I think the most recent example I saw was Miss Marvel. That movie's terrible. What is this character's character flaw? She doesn't have one? Oh, so she's just a female Superman? Yep. Oh, okay, I'm bored. I don't like Superman either. Same problem. Character doesn't have any flaws. Yeah. It's really boring to me. You got this character who's just like a paragon of virtue, and there's like nothing can reasonably oppose them, and you're like, well, this is... Fuck, man, this film's boring then.
Anyway,
video
you want to finally tell me about Loop Hero?
Sure. I was trying to write an article about Loop Hero earlier today, and I realized how difficult it is to actually articulate what this fucking game is.
Well, do it here.
Yeah, so Loop Hero is a game that was released at the beginning of March. It's a Devolver-published game. I played the demo a few weeks back, and I was like, this game looks like bullshit, and then I played it. I'm like, wow, this game is actually pretty fun. So I bought it. It is a combination of an idle game, a roguelike, an RPG, and a deck builder.
That's a lot of shit.
Yeah, it's got a lot of stuff going on, and you wouldn't think that it would really work together, but it kind of does.
The idle part surprises me.
So I'll explain this as carefully and clearly as I can. You can ask questions, because I think that'll be useful for the audience if I don't explain anything well enough.
Yeah, because I don't know anything about this one other than it's the indie success story.
Yeah.
Sold like 500,000 copies already.
Yeah, half a million already. Yeah.
And they're like really happy about that. I mean, you said it because early March. That's
March
pretty good for
3rd or 4th. They sold 500,000 copies in 2 weeks, basically.
That's incredible.
The roguelike part is that you go out on runs, so there's no permanence to the world you're exploring. So it's called Loop Hero because when you go out into the world, it sets up a path that is in a loop, and then your character walks around the loop. And it'll just keep walking around the loop until you beat the boss for that chapter, or you leave with your ill-gotten gains. It starts off with a stone path, a bunch of just void space that doesn't have any kind of world in it, and then slimes will spawn on the stone pathway. As you kill enemies, so there's more than just the slimes, but as you kill those slimes, you'll get cards. You go into each run with a deck of cards that can potentially be drawn by killing an enemy. They'll be like dropped as like part of the enemy's drop. So they can actually drop like loot that you can equip or cards. Sometimes neither.
And what do these cards do?
So the cards almost exclusively add something to the world. So one such card would be like a forest, so you can replace one of those rock pathways with a forest. Now when you walk through the forest, you'll gain a wood resource, and also every 2 in-game days that go by, a wolf or a fox or some shit will spawn in the forest tile, or it'll spawn in one of the adjacent tiles to the forest tile.
You get to basically kind of craft where the enemies are going to be.
You're adding these different cards, and some of them give resources when you pass through them that you can use when you get back to your base. A number of them will spawn enemies, which actually can be useful because in some cases, like the spider nest, it spawns a new spider on an adjacent tile every single in-game day. This has 2 really, really good uses. Number 1 is that you get a shitload of really weak enemies that have a very high chance of dropping more cards. So if you put a spider nest in, there's a good chance that whenever you pass by the spider nest, you'll get more cards for playing into the world, and you might get something that you're specifically looking for. The other big advantage this has is that there's a particular resource that only drops if you fight a battle with 4 or more enemies. So with the spider nest being able to spawn enemies relatively quickly, there's a very good chance that when you get to the particular tile that the spiders are occupying, that there'll be 4 of them waiting there for you, and then you'll have a chance at getting that particular item, the resource that only comes from a fight where you're fighting 4 or more enemies. Some of the cards are like that. Some of the cards are like the mountain or the forest, which just provide passive buffs to your character. What you're trying to do is to build out the world in such a way that you can maximize the character buffs you're getting while also collecting resources that you need. And then when you filled in a certain amount of the world map, that's when the chapter boss will spawn in. Before you fight the chapter boss, you always have a chance to bail with all of your resources. So if you're like, I don't think I can win this fight, then you can always just fuck off with all your shit. But then you don't have a chance of losing it. When you die, it reduces your reward. You do drop quite a bit of the stuff you've gathered. It's usually better to, kind of think like, okay, can I do this? Should I run away, or should I take all my stuff and leave? But yeah, so that's kind of like the roguelike. And then so the idle part of it is that you have no meaningful interaction with how your character moves throughout the world and how they battle. That's the idle game part. It just plays all of that itself.
Oh, okay.
So you're placing down elements into the world and then praying to God that your little guy doesn't die. So that's the deck buildy bit. You will unlock different kind of environment fixtures that you can bring into your deck, and those will have different effects, so you can kind of mix and match for certain strategies before you start a run, and then you're kind of playing whatever particular strategy you decided on. The cards do have different drop rates, but you'll be able to tell what drops more frequently based on the tier of the card before you go into the run. That's kind of a visual thing that's explained.
So what do you do with these resources? So let's say I bail out.
There's a base that you have, and as you collect these resources, you can build new structures within that base. These will provide bonuses to you, either in or out of the run, but most of them are inside of the run. So like the very first one is that you can put down a campfire, and that makes it so that whenever you finish a loop and get back to the base, when you pass through the campfire tile, which is where your base is located, you'll heal, I think, like 30%. And then there's like a potion shop that you can get, which makes it so you can have like some extra healing on your run. So your character will have potions that they can swig down when they get below a certain threshold of health. And then my favorite is that you can set up watchtowers so that there's a bunch of archers who will shoot down enemies that are on tiles that are adjacent to your camp, your base, which is very useful. Usually a good idea to make like a whole bunch of cheese monster farms around your base, and then have the archers, you'll just like walk into battle, and these archers from the watchtower will just destroy them. So you get some really good farms going there. But yeah, so there's like a bit of a macro level strategy to the game, in as far as like kind of like Stardew, where you're seeing a new structure that you want because you're like, ooh, that bonus is really good. So you work to get all the resources for it and then build it. And then once you build it, then you see another thing and you're like, ooh, that looks pretty good. But because you have that thing that you just built, getting to that next one will be a little bit easier because you've just like you added more healing to your runs, or you've made it so you have like watchtowers helping you out when you're like near your base. You unlocked a new card type, because a lot of them unlock new card types, and some of the unlockable card types are extremely powerful, like the river, which doubles the effectiveness of environment tiles that are beside it. Forests, which do a 2% attack increase when they're next to a river, do a 4% attack increase. And if you wrap the river around them, then they do like a 16% attack increase, which is insane.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kind of like seeing something and then setting it as a goal and then working towards it and then unlocking. There's like a lot of kind of goals born out of like seeing something and then unlocking it, and then seeing another thing you want and then unlocking that, and then seeing another thing and unlocking that. I have finished the game already. I think it runs out of steam when it runs out of new things for you to unlock. I feel like Stardew has the same problem, but Stardew Valley has a lot of things to unlock, and in the last 5 years, the developer has added a fuck ton of things to keep doing.
Yeah.
Where with Loop Hero, I feel like it ran out of, because there's like a story in the game. Not a great one, but I feel like the game ran out of steam before the story did. So I found that I was out of new things to unlock by the end of the 3rd chapter. There's 4 chapters in the game. Then all that I had left was just upgrading the existing structures I had. That took a lot of grinding. Like, I wasn't unlocking something new and exciting. I was just replaying the exact same strategies over and over and over again on Chapter 3 to get enough resources to upgrade these incredibly expensive, like to buy these incredibly expensive upgrades. And like the amount of improvement I was getting from them felt a lot more marginal and a lot less impactful than the kinds of upgrades I was getting before, right? When you add a completely new structure, it's like a big deal. When you upgrade an existing structure, and it heals you, like, oh, your campfire healing is now like 5% higher, it's like that was extremely expensive and it's not actually that big of a deal.
Not game changing enough.
Yeah, it's not as game changing as, like unlocking that first watchtower was, or, getting the river card for the first time and being like, holy shit, this will double the effectiveness of stuff. Or like getting the desert card for the first time, being like, holy shit, this is a crazy new card. I didn't even know it was a thing.
So they needed to have like more new cards in each chapter.
I think they just needed to have more meaningful upgrades to keep unlocking into the late game. I feel like the structures you're probably going to have unlocked by the time you're ready to tackle the fourth chapter, and the fourth chapter is so fucking difficult that you need a lot of those structures anyway to even make any meaningful progress against it. It's designed in such a way that you kind of need to have everything before you're reasonably ready to take on the fourth chapter, but I feel like getting to that point is just too tedious. It's a game that I think is fun until it's not. It's a game that I recommend for people to play, but not a game for people like I would recommend for people to finish, which is not something I say very often.
Yeah, no, one and done. That's surprising from the Rogue King.
Yeah, that's kind of Loop Hero in a nutshell. Is there anything else I haven't really addressed, or?
No, that was good.
Okay. Keep this in mind when I am writing the article. Well, I'm reviewing it. I wrote and rewrote trying to describe the game a bunch of times, and I basically just summarized what I wrote here. But so yeah, that's Loop Hero. I also played Monster Hunter, obviously. Did my collab with Pete. That was pretty fun. I think he did a pretty good job for being new to the game. It's really interesting going back into the base game when you have Iceborne mechanics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so like the clutch claw and the flint shot didn't exist when I played through the base game.
Right.
Using the flint shot in low rank is hilarious because the amount of damage you do to the monsters is like less than the amount of damage you would do with an end game weapon against the same monsters. So it's like you smash them into the wall and they take like 200 damage, and I'm like, wow, I do 200 damage just with my weapon in the end game.
Right, so for your Heat collab, you ended up just equipping like the bottom tier stuff, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been any fun if I wasn't. So I was playing dual blades for a bit, just because that's what Pete was playing, and then toward the end, I'm like, Pete, you don't need me to do any like keep playing this, do you? And he's like, nah. And so I switched over to the hunting horn and started being a little bit more aggressive with the monsters. At which point we started kicking the shit out of a ton of them. He's like, damn, that was fast. And I'm like, kind of taking the training wheels off at this point. I think we had a bit of fun with it, and he even said that he might play it again at some point. So that's pretty cool. He's like, yeah, I could totally see how I could get into this game. And I'm like, yeah, I figured you'd actually like this game as like a game beyond just playing it for this streaming event.
Yeah, it seemed like he was liking it. He complained about the hats.
Well, he didn't like that one that he was stuck with, but some of the other ones he liked a little better. He seemed to like more of the armored stuff. Like stuff that looked more like a knight in like shining armor kind of a deal. So he definitely was digging not some of the armor you start off with, but some of the stuff we started to get into is a little bit more knightly. I think the Rathian armor is exactly what the Huntsman wears. I think that he would have liked that, but we didn't. Like the Rathian and Anjanath would have been the next two monsters we would have fought on stream, but kind of ran out of time, so we didn't get that far. I also, just on the weekend before the collab, I beat Fatalis, which was the last monster I hadn't beaten in the game. That content is another fight like Elatrion. It's probably designed for 4 people, but if you have one incredibly stubborn individual, you can eventually beat it. I think the fight is easier to overcome than Elatrion, specifically because it's less bullshit. The biggest problem with that fight is that it's a huge damage race.
Yeah, didn't you say it was like a 30-minute time limit?
Yeah, so you have a 30-minute time limit to do 66,000 damage. For context, Alatreon takes me about 22 to 25 minutes, and it has 52,000 health. This creature has 14,000 more.
In 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Go. So what was your end time?
My best end time is 27.5 minutes.
Oh, that's not a lot.
My very first win, I posted on Twitter, and let me just look at the time for that. My very first win was 29 minutes, 23 seconds, and 16 milliseconds.
Wow.
I just
That's cutting it
Yeah, I
close.
just barely beat it. And like some of my other wins were also like 29 minutes. My closest was like 29 minutes and 45 seconds. So I was like 15 seconds away from failing. I have TO'd a few times on the fight. So to make up for the fact that it's like a huge damage race, there is a particular skill that you can and should bring into the fight. I actually do not know what the skill is called. I know what its alternative name is from the decorations. I think it's called Heavy Artillery. It gives you 100% extra damage on siege equipment, and the arena is littered with siege equipment. The opening strategy for this fight is to go in wearing the stealth mantle, and then there's these two cannons that are pointed at Fatalis. So you load up the cannons with your cat, and then you aim the one directly at Fatalis, and you aim the other one to point in front of the other cannon. So like you fire the one cannon off and Fatalis is like, fuck you. And then it like runs over to that cannon, and then you run over to the other cannon and then fire it off pointing it where Fatalis will run to. That's like the opening strategy. So that fires 10 cannonballs into Fatalis right away. If you have heavy artillery and you've eaten for the food skill that increases the damage that cannons do, each cannonball will do 450 damage, and you just fired 10 off into the monster. That's so much damage in such a quick time that Fatalis will fall over, and then you can tenderize its head and hit it with a basic combo right out the gate. So that's like the first almost 10% of its health in the first like minute and a half of the fight, which is good because you're going to need it. Then you can flint shot it. Unlike Alatreon, the arena that Fatalis is in is just like covered in walls, so it's very easy to flint shot. At least at the beginning of the fight, that does 2% of its health every single time. So you flint shot it, and that does 2% of its health. So you've definitely done 10% of the monster's health by this point. And now it's enraged. So if you are running Agitator, which you should be because it's the best offensive skill in the game, now the DPS race starts for realsies. The fight is split up into like 5 phases, kind of. It's really split up into like 3 phases, but there's like 5 times where he uses his insta-kill move. So people consider it like you can tell where his health is based on how many of these he's done. So the first one goes off at around 20%, the health being gone. So you just did most of the health already off of that opening cheese, which is good. You hit it Fatalis for a couple more minutes. You're probably at about the 5-minute mark, and it will go to use its first I'm going to burn everything to death move. It flies outside of the arena and then she uses this giant flame cone down on the entire arena. There's like a small part of a tower that's fallen over. You hide behind that. The attack melts that, but for that one, you've survived because you're in the only spot in the arena that's not engulfed in flames. That also opens up the back half of the arena, which is great. It has 2 really good things in it. It has 2 sets of binders, which you can fire from ballistas. They'll temporarily immobilize Fatalis so you can beat the shit out of it, which is very helpful. And it also has the roaming ballista, which I think you've seen me use in my stream. It's that like rail machine gun that you can fire repeatedly into a monster.
Yes.
So that with heavy artillery does 70 to 90 a shot if you shoot Fatalis' chest or its face, the optimal damage locations. And it has 100 shots, so if you shoot the chest the entire time for 70 damage per shot, that's 7,000 damage. So that's like 10% of the monster's health. You fire off all 100 rounds in like 30 seconds or less. So it's like when you factor in the fact that you can use the cannons at the start, like you get to flint shot the monster a couple times, and you have the roaming ballista, which recharges a couple times throughout the fight. You're like, okay, this is not nearly as impossible as it seems. Around the 35 to 40% damage mark, it'll use its second giant flame attack, and then it enters this like the second half of the fight where its chest is glowing and its chest will take more damage. And then it uses the big fire attack 3 more times, and during those times you just have to like run underneath the monster because it'll stand in the arena still, or it'll be flying in the arena still when it uses it, so there's like a safe zone underneath it. But yeah, it's a very interesting fight. It's pretty fun once you get the hang of it. The DPS race is a bit of a pain in the ass, but I gotta say, there's a part where you hit it with the Dragonator, which you will learn what a Dragonator is when you finally play the game, which also does like 10% of the monster's health. But when that happens, the music shifts from like, you're gonna die Fatalis' theme to playing like the loudest, most enthusiastic version of the Monster Hunter theme I have ever heard. It's like the most big PP moment I've ever had in a video game. You're like, oh man, this is like the most desperate struggle. But when you finally land like this huge hit against the monster, the horns come in and they're playing like the da 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 da. And then you're like, oh man, this motherfucker's gonna die. This is my song. These are my people. Let's kill this piece of shit.
It's my jam, boy.
And it only happens when you finally hit it with the Dragonator. So you hit it with that really big attack, and then it switches over into the big PP music. And I'm like, damn. If there's ever a moment that can be used for an example for why having really good music is important for selling the tone of a scene in a video game, that right there is a perfect example of it. It's like the music swells, you're in like the last desperate bit of the fight, and it's just you against the final fucking boss in the game, and you finally beat him. You feel like a fucking champion. I thought that part of the fight was like really, really well done. The only kind of gripe I have with Fatalis is that you can't use normal healing items against Fatalis. Every single one of his attacks does 150 damage or more. You have to go in with 200 health at all times, and you can only heal with max potions. It's like a regular mega potion doesn't heal even remotely enough to offset the amount of damage you take whenever you make a single mistake. It's certainly something. I've been going kind of long. So the only other things that I've kind of been dicking around with the last little bit, I've played Hitman 2 some more. I really liked Vermont, which I think you said was a really good level, and I agree 100%. Yep. It is a really good level. It's really condensed.
Yeah, it's the condensed, and like the targets are, you probably get to each target within like a minute or two if you know where you're going.
That, and it's got like the one target is very much a roamer and the other target's in a fortress, but the fortress isn't super duper big
or hard to get into.
Yeah, which leads me into the 6th level in the game, which is the final level in the game, though there is a 7th and 8th level that were part of the DLC that you convinced me to buy, and I'm glad you did. I haven't played them yet, but you said they're both better than level 6. Level 6 is the worst level in the game. It's so bad.
Yeah.
It's basically just...
I forgot about that one, actually, until you started mentioning it again. I'm like,
yeah, it's because it's not very good.
Twice.
It's actually very funny to me that the 6th level in the first game was the worst level, and the 6th level in the second game is the worst level.
And last level in Hitman 3 is the exact same.
Yeah. So the big problem with it is that there is so many bystanders in every single area that it's impossible, or next to impossible, to get away with doing any interesting kills. So the only way I've been able to kill any of the targets is by following the mission stories. Usually I explore, and then I find like ways that are not mission stories to kill them the first few times I run through the level, and then I'll do the mission stories to see what I'm missing, and then I'll do like my final run through the level, which is the always have the suit on, don't get spotted, right? Like, so the silent assassin suits only, which is really hard, but by that point I've explored the level so densely that I know how to do it. I have no idea how to like even do basic kills in this level. I've had to follow the mission stories. I can't get the targets to go to a place where they would be killable. I could take them out without having like a million guards breathe down my neck 3 seconds later. And there's like no places that you can cause accidents to them either. And I'm like, what the fuck are you, like, how do you do anything in this level? It's too locked down. I think that was intentional to make the level more difficult because it was the last level in the campaign, but that makes it not very fun to play. So fuck it.
Fair enough.
Because I was on vacation this week, I played through and finished Shadow Warrior. That was a gift from Thomas. We were talking about Doom Eternal last year around the Steam sale, and he bought me Shadow Warrior. I can see a lot of Doom's DNA in Shadow Warrior. It's just, it was made on like a fucking fraction of the budget. There's a lot of polish that is in Doom that is not in Shadow Warrior. So like the animations are, I think, all really bad. They don't sell the weight of any of the attacks. The combat arenas are also like kind of hit and miss. Some of them are pretty okay. They give you enough room to like move around and kite the enemies. Other ones are like really thin hallways, and I hated doing everything in them. I couldn't even move. I basically just had to destroy everything that was in front of me and pray to God that nothing big spawned. And when big stuff did spawn, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. They also have 2 really annoying enemies. One is the shaman, which summons little guys constantly and revives little guys to keep smacking you around. I don't like them because they're huge bullet sponges until you get the rocket launcher, at which point they're just trivial to take out. And the rocket launcher isn't unlocked until like the last third of the game. And then the berserkers, which are only vulnerable on their backs. It's just a fucking pain in the ass to shoot them in the back. I didn't like them very much because it felt like there was one valid approach for dealing with them, and that was to like have them run into an environmental fixture and then to like scoot around behind them and fire off a rocket into their back a couple of times and then they would die. And I'd be like, okay. It was so tedious trying to deal with them. In combat encounters, you'd think that they would be like, because they're a berserker, you think, oh, they'd be like super dangerous. It's like, no, you just like kite around, kill literally everything else. And then when everything else is gone, you go through the slow and pain in the ass process of taking out the berserkers because they're the only thing left. To this like, ridiculous like kiting maneuver to actually kill them. I didn't like them very much. I will say though that one of the things that we were discussing when Thomas bought me the game was I was like, wait, is there any like a good way to do a boss in a first-person shooting game? Because I thought all the bosses in Doom were kind of pish, or Doom Eternal rather. I think that Shadow Warrior in that regard actually does do a better job than Doom. The bosses in that game kind of make sense as first-person shooting bosses. They're not great, but they're not Shittown 3000 like they are in Doom. So I was like, oh yeah, this is how you would do a first-person shooting boss if you were going to do one, I guess. I still think that throwing the player into a combat arena and then telling them to fight for like 5 minutes straight is a better solution than doing a traditional boss, because combat arenas are way more fun and they test your abilities in a more frenetic FPS game than a one-on-one fight against a big boss does. And Doom Eternal has some of those. They're just like not the boss fights, which they should have been. But yeah, Shadow Warrior is pretty alright. It's not the most high budget thing I've played, so it was lacking in some quantities, but it does a pretty alright job of just being a fun ass first person shooter. And the only other kind of footnote is that I played Metro Exodus for 4 hours and then uninstalled it. So that'll tell you what I thought of that game.
Okay then.
Yeah, I sat down and the first 2 hours were like very linear set piecey moments. So I was like, okay, this is fine-ish. There's nothing extraordinary about this. This game is kind of reminding me of like Call of Duty so far, leaning very hard into like trying to be like realistic, and the levels are really linear, which I don't really have a problem with. But I'm a bigger fan of, like what Doom or Shadow Warrior did, where they drop you in an arena and you like have to run around and make decisions about what weapons you need to use on what enemies and what order you want to kill those enemies in, because it's like, oh, this enemy's a big pain in the ass, so I'll take them out first, and then with this weapon, and then I'll switch to this other weapon because it's really good against this one enemy that I don't like very much, so I want to get rid of it as quickly as possible, and then I'll take out the big fat guy last or whatever. In linear games that lean more into realism, I find that a lot of the time I'm just like, oh, I just like shoot the enemy in the head and then they're dead. Okay. But then it's like, oh, I got caught out in the open and I died in 3 hits, so that's fun. I don't like FPS games where the strategy is to hide behind cover like a little bitch the entire time. Because to me, realism isn't fun, and that actually drags me out of an experience really quickly. Because I'm like, oh, I'm just hiding behind cover because that's the only viable strategy. Woo! So yeah, I actually find games like Doom more immersive because they don't make me think that I'm playing a video game. Which probably sounds ridiculous, but... So that was basically my experience with Metro in the first 2 hours, and then after that it put me into an open world and made me craft ammo, and I spent most of my time crouching around, moving at the absolute slowest ass speed, because anytime anyone knew where I was, they just obliterated me because I didn't have the resources to deal with them. I just didn't bother reloading back into the game. When I had a sniper shoot me from across the map who I couldn't even see, I assume that they were close. It's just that everywhere I could hear the enemy, like the noise of the enemy coming from, I looked in that direction and all I saw was a bunch of amorphous gray blobs. And I'm like, where in that gray is the enemy? I can't see them. So I was like, I don't care for this at all. This is the most video game I think I've ever played. Which is hilarious because a lot of people are like, oh, it's so immersive because of how realistic it is. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like realism. I don't find it very fun. So yeah, that's what I've been doing over the last fucking week and a bit. What have you been doing?
I finished the rest of A Plague Tale: Innocence.
I thought we talked about this already. Oh no, we talked about it like not on the podcast.
I only did the first half. No, we talked about it on the podcast.
Oh, we did?
I did the first. Yeah.
Okay.
I did the first half, and then I did the second half after. It's a good game. So you know how I was saying it emphasized the stealth part a lot, and you had to do like the escort missions?
Yeah.
So it resolves that in the other half by giving you lots of different tools that you're able to like defeat the guards with. One part is like, oh, you can't get the helmet off the guard. Okay, you're gonna craft this thing that's basically gonna stink up their helmet. They're gonna take it off, and then you can whip a stone at them instead. So it keeps giving you enough tools, and then there's enough variety throughout the entire campaign that it never feels too like the same. Like I'm still doing the same kind of things, so that's kind of nice. And by the end, you're not super strong, but you're definitely able to overcome the guards in a much better way than you were before, when you were just helpless and only had like the stone and the sling. Now you've got a lot of different tools, so I really like that.
So they kind of meaningfully evolve the mechanics over the entire time, so you don't get bored.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. The voice acting is pretty good. The overall arching plot is kind of a bit predictable. I really liked the last chapter overall, and the last part where there's surprisingly a boss fight in this near the end, and it works enough.
I thought it was pretty funny, though, that you had to include the fucking spoiler tag after we recorded.
Yeah.
With regard to the story.
Hand out the way I thought it would.
Yeah.
My wife was
I mean,
right.
I guess it's not really a bad thing.
No. The way the game tells it, you can pretty easy to piece it together.
Yeah.
At least that plot point. You do have to... I won't say that. It's plot related. I won't have to put a spoiler tag on this. Sayonara Wild Hearts. I played that game.
How was that? Every time I look at it, I'm like, this game looks like you're on meth, but I also have no interest in playing it.
It's fun. It's about an hour and a half to 2 hours, give or take. Through that, it's funny because the game's like, we got the voice of Queen Latifah, and I'm like, she barely says anything in this. I think she's got about like 5 or 6 sentences throughout the entire thing.
Wow, they've made that like a marketing point.
Yeah.
So I figured that she narrated the entire game. I just didn't realize she spoke so little in it. Huh.
At least from what I remember, she spoke very little. Like I kept not going like, oh yeah, it's Queen Latifah telling me about the story. I think she's like in the intro before the game starts. The intro level, I think she says like what rank you get. So like no rank, silver rank, bronze rank, and gold rank. And then maybe at the end too.
She actually does a really good job in everything I've heard her narrate.
Oh no, it's good. Yeah.
Like that was like not to imply that it wasn't. She's got a really great voice for narration stuff. So yeah. I was kind of like, oh, that's like a good fit. But I'm a little bit surprised to find out that she apparently doesn't actually narrate that much in the game.
I might be being a little unfair. It might be like 10 lines, but still, it's not very much throughout your hour and a half to 2 hour experience.
Mm-hmm.
So levels are basically told through the gameplay, and you proceed to collect these through the levels, like these little hearts and then these big hearts. And the more that you collect without dying, the higher your combo goes. So if you die, then your combo gets completely reset. So if you're trying to aim for that gold rank, you're screwed at that point.
I didn't realize you could die in this game.
Die and then restart at the checkpoint. But so get gold rank. You have to keep that combo going. So at this point, I've done I think like 16 of the 22 levels in gold, so it's not like it's overly hard.
Okay. Do you need to get gold for platinum, or?
Actually, most of the achievements are weird things, like you have to gold this level 3 times. That's like kind of the more of the simple one, but there's like one that's like hit the pause button 12 times, and it's like in a silly riddle and shit like that.
What
But then
the hell?
there's some harder ones where it's like, in this level, don't collect any of the hearts. And I'm like, oh, this one's actually a good one because I have to retrain my entire brain in order to not do this. I did it, but it's really difficult.
The anti-level.
Yeah, it's like those pointless Mario runs.
Yeah.
That you see on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, I have to rework it. My brain, like every so often, my brain would be like, go collect that. I'm like, you fucking dumbass, damn it.
You degenerate scumbag piece of shit.
You could collect the big one, but there's also another level where it's like, you have to get to the end and have 0 score, and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sakes.
That is actually like an interesting challenge, though.
Yeah, no, it is. It's just like, oh god, I have to think about how to do this. So there's a lot of them that are like that. The gold is just to unlock this one secret level that's, I think it's called the YOLO level, and you have to get a rank on that, and then you get the achievement for that. So that's why you have to get gold on everything else to unlock the ability to have that level.
Okay, so it's not explicitly linked to an achievement, but you need to do it to get to another thing that is explicitly linked to an achievement. So
Correct.
it might as well be.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, but it's a lot of fun.
Is it on Game Pass?
Not a clue. It's easy to pick up and like just gold star a level in like maybe 10 to 20 minutes depending on how difficult the level is. So for levels where you can die, it's a lot more forgiving with the score. Like I've gotten like 5,000 to 10,000 more than what it was asking for. But anything that's like a level where you can't die, those are the levels where it's like you have to really know where to go for the level. And some of these levels are like only like 2 to 3 minutes long. Or no, 1 to 2 minutes
Yeah,
long.
I was gonna say it's
the big boy that's like 5 minutes long.
I was gonna say, like when you say 20 minutes, you mean like you're playing through it a handful of times.
Multiple
to
times,
actually...
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Because you'll die in the silliest spots, and you'll be like, "No, my combo." Because what happens is that you collected like 100 of these little stars, and each of them is going to get you like 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4, and it keeps growing. So if you die, it restarts at 1. So those little stars that were going to give you 100 are now like 1. You're like, I can't catch up from that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a 1 life run, and that's it. I think you can kind of fuck up a little bit at the beginning, maybe die there, and that's about it. But other than that, yeah, it's like, oh, I died. Shit.
Shit.
Restarting. And the last one I've been playing is whipped out the 3DS again and started playing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on 3DS.
I was not expecting Whipped Out to be followed by 3DS. Whipped out my cock.
I don't do that. That's rude. Anyway,
It does not appear to be on Game Pass, at least not on PC.
Okay. Ocarina of Time is really good on the 3DS. I really like it, other than I think my hands are a little bit too big for it now.
But that is the best way to play that game.
Yeah, no, it really is. For those who don't know me, my first real console was the GameCube. No, well, Dreamcast, then the GameCube.
Lying piece of shit. You had a Dreamcast.
Okay, I'll reword that. My first console that had ongoing games at the time was the GameCube.
That's actually a sidebar thing. Why did you have a Dreamcast?
My father.
It was just because your dad was
Connections
like...
at work.
Oh, he just got it from work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then they stole 3 years of my allowance for it.
Jesus Christ, my aunt and uncle, your fucking parents they're special sometimes.
Yeah, I knew how much I got screwed later on. I was like, fuck's sakes, this console was dead when you gave it to me.
Yeah, no kidding.
There was no new games coming out for it. I just didn't know about it. But anyway, on the GameCube, I played the Ocarina of Time, and I thought the graphics were really shitty at that time.
That's because they were. It was an N64 game that they
Yeah.
didn't make any attempt to improve, and you got it as a pre-order bonus with Wind Waker, right?
I borrowed it actually from a friend.
Okay, so they got it.
But I still got to play
Yeah,
it.
they got it as a pre-order bonus from... I remember that because I never played Ocarina on the Nintendo 64 either.
64.
So I played it by way of that, and I didn't care how much uglier it was than Wind Waker. I thought it was a fun-ass game when I was a kid. But I liked Wind Waker more because in Wind Waker, Link had a personality, and in Ocarina of Time, he was this, like, square-faced fucking degenerate who just screamed a bunch.
Yeah!
Yeah.
Oh!
I've never been able to get over the
Yeah.
fact that Link has zero personality in almost every single game that he's in.
Wind Waker is really underrated.
In that regard, yes. There's a bunch of other problems game design-wise and pacing-wise that particular Zelda game has. Yeah, I really don't like how in most games Link is basically the same as the fucking shithead, boring-ass anime protagonist in a lot of, like, self-insert anime protagonist kind of thing. I really don't like that.
Yeah, he's got all the anime grunts. Yeah, no, the aiming's fun with, like, the gyro stuff. I don't have the 3D effects on. I don't like that anymore. I liked it when it was first introduced, but then...
Do you find it hurts your eyes to look at it?
Now it does.
See, it always did that to me.
It didn't before. I think I got old.
I always found it really challenging to look at. It was like, oh, this is cool, but also my fucking eyes hurt after looking at it for 30 minutes or, like, less.
Yeah.
The gyro aiming, I really like that a lot, actually. I think gyro aiming, like, for me, the mouse is the king. But then gyro aiming, 100%. It's, like, way more natural than using a fucking controller. I fucking hate aiming on a controller. It's the worst shit in the world.
Yeah, no, it really does work with the bow and the slingshot.
Generally speaking, like, a stick can get you, like, in the general vicinity, but then, like, the gyro is, like, get those, like, last little, like, notches in the right direction.
The biggest problem on the N64 controllers is just got that one middle stick.
Yeah.
At least modern controllers are a little bit better for that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine playing it on the N64.
I played Majora's Mask on what was basically an N64, and it was terrible. I say basically I was playing it on the Wii with a GameCube controller, so it's basically the N64 version. You don't have the
Right.
C
Yeah.
buttons, but the C stick doesn't work as a secondary stick. It still works like the C buttons did. Functionally, it was the same experience.
My plan is to play that and then actually open up my copy of Majora's Mask, play it on the 3DS.
That
Because I have yet to really play that
that
one.
is apparently a very different game from the original. Everything feature wise that is in Majora's is there, but like they removed a bunch of the things that a lot of people point to as being some of Majora's best qualities in the 3DS remake because the team making it fundamentally doesn't understand why people actually like that particular entry in the series. So they like fixed a bunch of things that they thought were wrong, but a bunch of other people really like.
I'll keep that in mind.
The third boss is also changed to the point where it's like there's like a speedrunner strat you can do, and I did against the third boss that does not exist in the remake.
Okay, then.
I remember that boss being terrifying as a kid. Well, it's a fish, right? And I'm terrified of like shit attacking you in the water. But Miranda's like, you just need to do this. And then I did the thing that she said. And I'm like, oh, wow, this boss is super duper easy. And she's like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, you can't do that in the 3DS remake. You have to like specifically do all of these extra things because they changed how the fight works. So it takes like 15 minutes to finish instead of the 5 you just finished the fight in. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of poo.
Yeah. But that's all I've been
Okay.
playing.
So you've just given up on Breath of the Chungus then.
It'll come up one day. But I don't promise anything.
Well, I mean, you can do what I did with Metro, where I did. I played it for like, I gave it the old college try. I played it for about 4 hours, and I'm like, am I having fun? No. Okay, then stop playing the game, because there's like
Yeah.
an abundance of other things to play out there, right?
There are. That's it for our show this week. Thank you all for joining us. If you want, you can follow us on Twitter at the Frosty Canucks or follow the podcast at any of the places this podcast is available on, such as Anchor, Spotify, and Stitcher. Or you could follow me at Javm Animation. That's JAVM Animation. And Frosty.
I write things on my blog. That's frostylight.ca. Go there, read stuff, please. By the time this goes live, I want to have my post about Loop Hero out, so go read that. And the following week, we'll have a post for maybe in March, where I talk about basically all of the games that I mentioned in this podcast already, because they were the games that I needed to play for that collaboration anyway. For keeping tabs on me, you can follow me at FrostyLight on Twitter. For following my art stuff specifically, you can follow me at FrostyLight on Instagram. If you want to come and see me do art stuff or stream video games, that would be Twitch. Frosty Light over on there. I stream every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, which is now changed because of the time change in Canada, which is confusing the shit out of people.
Can we not talk about that?
Fucking time change. But yeah, I think that's where all my stuff is. That's where it is. You can find me. So yeah.
Yeah, now that Frosty's internet service provider isn't being a complete jackass, Frosty Fridays are
Yeah,
saved.
no shit.
Stay frosty.